Look at, take that off.
Like looking at yourself?
Oh man, this is gonna be good.
Lullaby music gonna put me asleep here.
Welcome to the September 4th regular business meeting of the Littleton City Council. We'll start with the roll call.
Mayor Brinkman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Valdez.
Present.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Here.
Councilmember Fay.
Here.
Councilmember Elrod.
Here.
And Councilmember Schlachter.
Here.
Will you please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Our next agenda item is public comment. If you would like to address the City Council, please have signed in on the green sheet in the back. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. The City Council is not authorized by Colorado Open Meetings Law to discuss, comment, or take action on any issue raised by public comment that's not part of tonight's agenda. The mayor may refer the matter to staff to obtain additional information and report back to council as appropriate. Thank you. So I will call your name and come on down and introduce yourself and your, we have your contact information, so you just need to give us your name and you'll have 3 minutes. The first one is Rebecca Askew.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rebecca Askew, a resident of Littleton. We have a few comments and observations after the August 29th public meeting on the proposed gun store and shooting range in South Park. And we are aware of only one City Council member who has talked with us about concrete, actionable steps that the council can take to address one of the main concerns, the inevitable noise problems that the shooting range will generate. We are encouraged because of this council member, though discouraged in terms of the council as a whole. The council, as the elected representatives of the city of Littleton, should be giving directions to the city administrator, not taking direction from others who have a more narrow vision of what should be done to help South Park residents. City administration, who has told us there is nothing much that they can do as it relates to the legitimate concerns of South Park owners and residents. We also have a few observations leading us to that after that meeting. The city administration changed the ground rules for conducting the public meeting in emails and a meeting before the public meeting. We were told that the format of the meeting would include question and answer time. Instead, on the night of the meeting, the city changed the question and answer session to submit a written question format, which significantly curtailed the exchange of information in the meeting. Writing down questions allows the city to manage the question and direct its answers. When we questioned this, we were told, believe us, it's a good reason for the change. This approach leads to distrust on the part of the citizenry. I hope the council will investigate this approach and talk to the city staff about how such methods undermine rather than build community trust. Many of the attendees were planning to ask detailed questions about various parts of the design process at the appropriate times in the city presentation. It should be noted that the city manager had led us to believe this was possible. Given the change in the public meeting format, these follow-up questions largely went unanswered and unasked. We also learned at the meeting that the city seems uninformed with some of the details of the permitting process. The city didn't know what type of gun Triple J intends to have at its shooting range. We assumed that through the permitting process, a process meant to ensure safety, noise, pollution, and ventilation standards, this would be necessary knowledge. This makes us wonder what additional questions the city has not yet contemplated. The city doesn't appear to want its citizens involved in the permitting process, yet the city doesn't seem to know some of the basic particulars of the permit. The city was unaware that the development activity list on the city's website doesn't have the permitting information on the proposed project posted, although there's documentation of every other South
Becca.
Park project.
Your 3
Great.
minutes is up. Thank you. Christine Berg.
Good evening. My name is Christine Berg, and I'm a resident of Littleton. Additionally, the city had no answer as to why this public record was missing. These are the kind of concerns that engender mistrust. We are merely asked to believe that the city is going to make sure we're safe. We should believe that this non-transparent process is going to address our concerns and get correct structural details related to safety, toxicity, and noise, traffic and parking issues, and providing for our safety on the streets and neighborhood around the proposed gun site. We believe City Council should be in charge of this review. The Council should direct the process to ensure that it includes public scrutiny and Council oversight. The administration should be charged with collecting and presenting information to the City Council, not managing the process, particularly with our current concerns. This project goes far beyond mere technical issues of zoning. It is a political process that needs the council's involvement. It appears that the city sees itself as having no responsibility to the citizens of the South Park area concerned with the letter of the day. It has admitted that it shares responsibility for this zoning mistake and for not having updated its zoning laws in the 20 years since residents and schools moved into the area, yet it offers no solutions. It appears that there is no entity to protect the legitimate safety concerns of South Park schools and residents, nor of our property values or our quality of life. There's no one to protect us if the City Council doesn't step forward quickly. We urge the City Council to take a leadership role. To make this permitting process transparent, to address legitimate concerns about safety and noise, to intervene in concrete ways that are able to be understood and monitored. We need your help now.
Thank you. Jim Mascolo.
I'm Jim Mascolo, and I live in Littleton. A number of us were at the meeting, the public meeting last Wednesday, and I was left with a few strong impressions from that meeting. First, the city administration, although purportedly experts on zoning, didn't understand the implications of the South Park plan development regulations they've had in place for the last 20 years, and they admitted as much at the meeting. Second, the city doesn't want to talk with its citizens in an open manner, even to the extent that they'll change the meeting rules just before a meeting starts, all in an effort to control and avoid difficult questions. Finally, and most surprisingly, the city considers itself to be absolutely powerless to do anything about the situation in South Park. They would like us to regard zoning as a force of nature, which we, the common citizens, can't possibly understand. But what I believe we do understand is such things as leadership, vision, and genuine concern for citizen safety, property values, and quality of life. Things the city administration doesn't seem to have an interest in. So we are badly in need of help from the council. We need the council to take back control of this process from the city administration and actually sit down with us or on our behalf in a very concrete way to start addressing issues related to this project, such as noise, parking, and ventilation. We've heard already from a couple members of the council. We'd like to hear from more of you. We don't subscribe to the powerlessness and pessimism of the city administration. And finally, we would also like the city council to investigate why this city administration seemingly has changed or in fact ended its cooperation in the permitting and approval process with South Park Owners Association. The city has undermined SPOA and its ability to decide what kinds of developments are appropriate for South Park, and that's bad news for everyone in South Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Les Beecher?
Good evening. I'm Les Beecher, and I live in Littleton. I'm here to object to the city's granting a permit to allow a business, Triple J, to operate a shooting range in my neighborhood. I'm not protesting gun ownership. The city should never have allowed an incompatible business, a shooting range, where I and my neighbors will hear gunshots anytime during the day and into the night. Several failures on the city's part have led to this unfortunate situation. The city failed to enforce its own permit guidelines and has allowed Triple J to move forward with their construction without a proper permit. A homeowner facing neighbors' legitimate complaints could not build a chicken coop without a permit, yet Triple J began its construction of a firing range before it got its permit, and in the face of neighbors' objections. The city failed through its economic development department, as far as I understand that, to recommend another suitable location for Triple J to set up its operation. The city failed to hold public meetings to introduce Triple J and its intentions to those of us most affected. Are city officials trying to sneak something by us, I wonder? We've heard apologies from Mr. Ralph and other city officials for their admitted lack of foresight and lack of enforcement of city policies. I'd like to hear Mr. Ralph and those city officials apologize to Triple J for revoking their application out of respect for the residents of the city who have a right to peace and quiet and safety for themselves and their children and their neighbors. That would be a city and its officials worthy of my respect and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Radulovic? I'm sorry, Dan, I do it every
I promise by the
time.
end of this, you will get my last name right at some point. My name's Dan Radulovic. I live at 7000 South Gallup Street, and I've been here since 2009. I am concerned and disappointed that this council removed the primary residence clause from the short-term rental ordinance that's currently drafted. This council has talked on several occasions how they really like the sense of community they have in Littleton. It's one of the reasons that people live here. It's why we stay here. And I would hope that you as council members see yourselves as defenders of our neighborhoods and our community. This ordinance, however, does very little to protect us in our neighborhoods and our communities. Basically, it allows for these communities to be eroded because you're putting commercial hotels in a residentially zoned area in our neighborhoods. If you have 1, 2, 3 of these on each block of your city, our community will erode eventually. These people do not have any concerns with Littleton. In fact, most of the time, they're not even here to visit Littleton. They're here to go to a concert at Res Rocks, go to the Grand Doozy, maybe partake in some marijuana tourism. And I've also heard stories of people in the city, they rent these in order to have a party at this residence, because they don't want to irritate their own neighborhood. What you're doing here under this draft is you are you are essentially granting a commercial business license to someone to run a lodging business in a residential zone, which you are going to collect sales tax on, without doing any zoning work and virtually no regulation. Honestly, that should kind of make your skin crawl if you're a civil servant. This needs to change. This needs to come back in. A couple of other concerns that I have. First is the occupancy requirements. They're very inadequate. In a 2,000 square foot space, you can have 15 people under this current drafting. That's entirely too many people. I can tell you through personal experience, just from the one that was around around our neighborhood. That's too many people. It needs to move to a 2-by-bedroom occupancy. I think that's a better solution. Lastly, safety. Apparently, the only reason that we have a moratorium right now is because there were safety concerns. To be realistic, I think this was a liability concern more than a safety concern. That's what's addressed in this particular ordinance. A person comes in with an application, signs the application and says, I have the proper safety equipment. You, in turn, as a city, say, we might drop by at some point to take a look at that. When you compare that to other businesses where the public is going to be, they are required to have an initial inspection prior to opening and doing business, and they are required to have annual inspections. If you're concerned about safety, that needs to be in there, not just basically a safety from liability on the city's end. I'll be back in 2 weeks to talk for 3 more minutes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Julie Radulkovich.
Close enough. Yep.
Gotcha.
Lizzie is silent. What's your first name? Julie. I'm also here to talk about the short-term rentals. You know, I know that this discussion really heated up in May, starting in our neighborhood, and I know that the administration and the city council has received a lot of feedback from a lot of us in our neighborhood and starting to see it kind of in other neighborhoods. The city administration held a listening session for us, so we had a pretty good turnout there where I think we gave a lot of good ideas to the city, so I appreciate that. So. And then we've also shared information about how other cities have been dealing with this short-term rental with the Airbnb and the VRBO. So I feel like we've been able to give the group a lot of information. My concern is based on where the conversation went at the study session last week, is a lot of that feedback isn't really incorporated into where it looks like we're going with this. And so again, as Dan had indicated, I'm concerned that we're going to have unstaffed hotels that really aren't regulated too well, and we don't have the teeth and the regulations to deal with the situation, and it could easily get out of control. So that's what my concern is. So I would ask that, you know, we look at starting more restrictive, and as time goes by, if those restrictions need to, you know, come off, we look at that. So what I'm proposing and laying out there is one of 2 options. Is you take kind of what you are starting to look at, the path that you're going down based on the study session, and add a little bit more teeth to it. Adding back the primary resident. So basically looking at, you know, I understand the discussion was 1 person, 1 license, but I think there's easy ways to get around that. So I think adding back in the primary resident makes sense to limit the number of those, so you can't get around that. I'm also asking that we look at the time frame. Right now, I don't think my understanding is that there is not a time frame of a limitation of how often a person can rent this out. Like, my understanding is, as it stands right now, it's 365 days. And so my concern is we also need to look at that. I think, you know, property owners have rights, and I'm fine if people want to, you know, go on vacation and rent out their house, but I don't think it needs to be turned into a full-service hotel. So, and then also looking at the safety checks, again, if you're going to grant a business license, you know, the people that are in there in the house need to be safe, and then the neighbors around us need to be safe. I mean, a lot of times in these newer neighborhoods, we're so close together that, as you saw in South Park, 1 fire can decimate 3 different houses. So we need to look at that, and we also need to understand, you know, a little bit better of who's going to be policing this, how this is going to work, how we work together to manage this overall process. So I'm asking that the council put a little bit more teeth and rules and regulations around this to give us a little bit more solid kind of foundation with where we're at. Now, if you guys feel like you can't get to that point right now and you need more time, then perhaps you should consider option 2, which is just prohibiting these short-term rentals across all residential zoning neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you. Christoph Demont Heinrich.
My name is Christoph DeMont Heinrich, and I live in Littleton. And my comment tonight is about the proposed shooting range in South Park. I've lived in Highline Crossing co-housing for 1 year. I waited 2 years to get a townhome at Highline because I wanted to live in a place that promoted community. I know all of my neighbors, and I absolutely love living in Highline Canal co-housing, its community, its beauty, and its quiet. I do not want to have to move because a business that does not belong in this location and which is currently squatting illegally, according to South Park HOA, forces me out due to noise. This illegally squatting business threatens to force me out due to gunshot noise. Gunfire equals a repetitive noise, a rapid, repeated all day long noise. It is not at all like the noise from a private conversation, to which gunshot noise was inaccurately and misleadingly compared at a public hearing on this issue last week. Having a gun range in this quiet location in South Park HOA is a profound quality of life issue. One I know that would deeply disturb every single one of the city council members here and city employees who are here if you were unlucky enough to live within earshot of that shooting range. The quiet in our neighborhood stands to be destroyed by the sound of gunshots for 10 to 12 hours per day, every day for the next 20 years. No one, not even most gun range users, wants to live next to the constant sound of gunfire. No one. I ask everyone here present today, do you find the sound of gunfire pleasant or unpleasant, calming or anxiety-provoking, relaxing or stressful? What about veterans with PTSD who live in this South Park neighborhood and or work nearby? Has anyone bothered to find out if there are those with PTSD who do live or work nearby? Will they be forced to move out, quit their jobs in order to protect and maintain their individual psychological health? Why are city noise thresholds exclusively qualitative in nature rather than comprehensive in nature? Our City of Littleton noise ordinance our City of Littleton noise ordinances must not only take into consideration decibel level, they should also and must also take into account the issues of frequency, repetitiveness, quantity, and duration of noise. We did not choose to live near a shooting range. The range is being imposed upon us after we made a choice to live in a very unique co-housing community here in Littleton. In fact, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are only a handful of co-housing communities in all of Colorado. The city appears intent upon destroying our community by allowing a shooting range that is just 100 meters from hundreds of people's homes. That's not right, fair, or within the vision that the City of Littleton ought to have for its residents and its businesses, which need to be logically located. A shooting range does not logically belong next to 3 residential neighborhoods, dozens of office buildings with professional businesses, not factories, and multiple schools and daycare centers. South Park is not the appropriate location for this business, not at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeannie Erickson?
To make it work. Good evening, City Council. My name is Jeannie Erickson, and I live in District 1. Here's a picture of my friend Colleen. She died tragically in a pedestrian car accident on September 2nd, 2014, 4 years ago last Sunday. I'm here for my annual visit regarding her death. She was crossing the street on Federal and Prentice right outside of her home in Littleton. I've been in front of council numerous times in the past 4 years, making you aware that there is not one single crosswalk on Bellevue or on Federal Boulevard between Bellevue and Bowles, with many apartments, condos, parks, a ball field, soccer field, grade school, middle school, citizens, adults, and children crossing 4 lanes of Federal, taking their life into their own hands with no crosswalk available to safely cross. I see that on your agenda tonight is an ordinance to finally put a flashing push-button light at the intersection of Federal and Berry. By the way, I did not know this was on your agenda for tonight until an hour ago when I brought up the agenda. It's just a coincidence that I'm here speaking about my friend tonight. It's only taken 4 years to make this happen, which I think is awful, but at least it looks like it's going to happen. I personally don't think Barry is the correct place to put the push-button flashing light, because the S-curve closer to the place where the apartments are, which is a much busier area for people to cross, and where people would cross more often, would be either Prentice or Federal Circle. I think that these two intersections should also be looked at as a possibility for the flashing light. I suggest that all council members drive the area on Federal from Bellevue to Bowles to see where the best place would be to put the push-button flashing light. There have been many of these lights put up since my friend's death in Littleton in the last 4 years. I'm unsure why it took so long for this to happen. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Jeannie. Those are all the folks that have signed up. If there's anybody who would like to make a comment, you can do so at this time. Seeing no one, we'll close the public comment. At the beginning of the meeting, I indicated that the council, due to the Colorado Open Meetings Law, cannot discuss any comments that were not on the agenda. The reason for that is it's a public meeting, so the public needs to be notified of what the conversations would be coming from the dais. So there were a number of questions I saw, both our city attorney, city manager, and a number of council members writing down a number of thoughts and questions that were brought up this evening regarding the Triple J situation and then also the Airbnb. I'll ask the city manager and city attorney at this time if there is any comments that you want to make. I am also assuming, or not assuming, but we all expect that there will be a more thorough answer of the issues brought up in the written comments that you guys provide us on our packet for next week. So I'll let the city manager answer any questions that you wanted to make any comments.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'll let Steve Kemp, our city attorney, kind of respond to some of this maybe as well here, but maybe just a few general comments. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with some of the public comment that was expressed here this evening. Quite honestly, I realize that the meeting was very emotional here last, was that Wednesday, the 29th? We had approximately 80 people there. I know many of council was actually there. I was the one who changed the agenda for the meeting simply because of the word that we were getting here about the possible participants that were going to be at the meeting. And it wasn't so much about the city staff and protecting us as much as it was those who might attend, including those that we thought might be agitating the other side of the issue here. Plus there was information that we had where some of the SPOA representatives had been intimidated. So we did take direct control of this. It was my decision, and I was not going to let the meeting de-escalate into something that quite honestly was going to be unacceptable. So I take responsibility for that fully. I also promised that group that we would follow up, and we had a meeting here again with staff to kind of debrief what we did here this last Wednesday night. We do intend to put up a web page here in the near term, to which we have approximately 200 questions that were written on cards. Many of them, you know, are really talking about the same issues here, but we have aggregated all those. We are also putting up an audio file on our web page here so that people can actually listen to this if they want. We're also taking that and we're going to be, what's the term here? The city clerk, help me with that.
It's so bad, you're not going to put that
apparently, okay. Well, we're going to try to take the audio file, apparently, and translate that into the actual words, the questions. There was a lot of follow-up questions here that weren't written on cards, and so we're going to certainly address that. One issue I would like to address is the question was raised about economic development and whether or not the city steered them to this specific building. That is not true. And we have talked with the economic development staff here today. They participated in a meeting and listened when they were looking at this particular building, but they were not directed by economic development for this building. They participated in a general discussion some time ago about looking at a new site for which they would construct new, but not this site. So there are a lot of questions, misinformation, and we're going to try to do our best to address that. The purpose of the webpage also is to provide timely and updates as they kind of occur here over time. I do take exception to the fact that somehow people think that we are interfering with SPOA and their process, and that is incorrect at multiple levels. In fact, we have a great relationship with SPOA. We work tirelessly in making sure we communicate at all levels over time. Do we recognize there's opportunity for improvement? Yes, we absolutely do. So I think that's generally the comments I would make. I think we've been very consistent about our message here on the city's ability, the council's ability legislatively, where they cannot take action to somehow stop this. And I'll let the city attorney respond to that issue.
Mayor, Council, to follow up on the city manager's remarks, and again, I have to disagree with some of the comments tonight. There was a start of demolition in that building without a permit. As soon as the city became aware, a stop work order was imposed, and the developer was compelled to obtain the appropriate permits. They are actually having to pay 100% penalty, so they're having to pay double the normal permit fees for because of that violation. And the city has been engaged in actively inspecting both the retail component and the range component. Not only has the city been actively engaged in that, I think more importantly, the city went out and retained International Code Council, who are the folks who write the international codes used throughout North America. These are the people who literally wrote the rules on shooting ranges, and they are doing the customized inspections. And the city did that because of its concern for public safety. Now, I can tell you, I spend tremendous amounts of time talking with the lawyer for SPOA. Mr. Minnick and I have a very great relationship. We've compared notes on a number of legal issues, discussed varying approaches, and the city and SPOA have communicated continuously, and we recognize our own unique roles. One of the points that has to be understood is the city is a government. SPOA operates through a private contract with the various property owners. So they are operating in terms of the terms of that contract, unlike the city, which we operate in the terms of our code. And so the relationship has been outstanding. Finally, it is important to note the zoning here, the plan development zoning, is really a zoning where the property owner works with the city to develop the development standards and uses. The city, as much as we may not like a particular use on a piece of property, cannot simply go in and say to a property owner who's created a set of uses, well, we don't like your choices, therefore we're going to erase one of your choices, particularly after the property owner has expended money and relied on the city's actions. I will tell you, and I'll address this more in my written response, the city has aggressively, to the fullest extent we can permitted by law, is doing everything we are able to do to ensure the public health safety is protected. Everything from requiring compliance with EPA standards on ventilation to requiring compliance with EPA lead disposal standards and requiring that the residential, not the business, not the commercial, the residential standards of our noise code are complied with. So for the record, the city is taking every bit of this extremely serious. We recognize issues, and we recognize how serious we need to treat it. And with that, I'll follow up with. And in terms of finally, the question came up, well, why doesn't the council take action? This is not a case of zoning. This is a case of a building permit. And there are a whole series of United States Supreme Court cases. Probably the best one that some people may know is a case called Nolan versus California Coastal Council. And what it basically said is government cannot withhold building permits to try to force a property owner to do something. That violates the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution. And similarly here, whether one likes it or agrees with it, the property owner of that site does have due process rights under both the United States and the Colorado Constitutions, which have to be recognized and upheld. We certainly recognize that. And so the council doesn't have the ability to simply stand up and say, well, we don't like the use, we're going to refuse building permits, we're going to refuse to let you do this. What we do have the ability to do is to make sure we protect in that process the public safety, health, and welfare in every way we possibly can.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. All right, so that will, we'll move on to consent agenda. And our first item on consent agenda items, let me just quickly explain, can be adopted by a simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion, and any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. Our first item is 472018, resolution approving a memorandum of understanding for the use of the 18th Judicial District Juvenile Assessment Center. Resolution 53 is a resolution recommending full funding and permanent reauthorization of the Land and Water Conservation Fund.
Pull.
Ordinance 33 is an ordinance on first reading authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Colorado Department of Transportation for reimbursement of costs associated with the installation of a pedestrian-activated cross-traffic light in both directions of Federal Boulevard at Berry. And item ID 18293 is approval of the August 21st, 2018 regular meeting minutes. So I need a motion, please.
I move to approve consent agenda items A, C, and D.
And a second, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items A, C, D. Vote.
The vote, excuse me, the vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Councilmember Elrod.
Yeah, I'd like to, we became aware that there was an omission to the resolution for Resolution 53 under paragraph, so where it reads, now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Littleton, Colorado, that. So for those citizens that are here, the packet does include the new language. But for those that have received this through our webpage, it is not there, so I'd like to add that. And it reads, the City Council, do you want me to read it, Wendy? The City Council of the City of Littleton hereby recommends full funding and permanent reauthorization for the Land Water Conservation Fund, and hereby encourages the Colorado Congressional Delegation to support full funding and permanent reauthorization of the Land Water Conservation Fund.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Councilmember Valdez. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, we have nothing under general business, and we have no ordinances on.
That was it just amendment?
Oh, what did it?
You need to vote on,
Oh,
well, you
okay.
don't have a main motion, but you need
I'm
to
going.
vote on an amended.
Gotcha. We need a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 53 as amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on Resolution 53. Now you ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimous.
Okay, there. Now we're done. Council comments. We'll start with the city manager.
Just one comment here during public comment. The federal traffic signal, the pedestrian signal, the reason why it took so many years, quite honestly, is the challenge that we had in obtaining right-of-way from Denver Water, and that is the sole cornerstone issue. That's why it's taken so long, is the acquisition process with them. We could not proceed under the CDOT regulations here until we cleared that right-of-way. So it's been unfortunate. I appreciate that. That's been a challenge ever since I've been here in my 3.5 years, but we finally have overcome that hurdle, and now we're ready to construct it. That's the end of my report, Mayor.
Thank you. City Attorney.
Mayor, I have no report.
Thank you. Councilmember Elrod.
Yes, actually, in light of the resolution that we just passed for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And honestly, in the past couple of months, we've heard from, so tonight we are aware of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. We heard from Arapahoe County Open Space, and I think it was the Land Conservancy Trust. And as I look at these, all of these are have the same intent and goals of preserving, protecting, acquiring open space. And when I think about one of the things that the citizens really treasure and pride, and we take pride in here in Littleton, is our open space, our trails, et cetera, I'd really like to ask council support to direct staff to bring forward to us a look at the various organizations and funds that can help support us in really pursuing some acquisition or preservation strategies around open space. We know that's a critical element of our community, and I'd love for us to really become much more proactive. For example, with the LWCF, it's been 30 years since we took any, I don't know if we asked for anything, so I think we absolutely should take that initiative. So I would ask for council support in directing staff to do that.
Okay, yeah, this would require probably that magic amount of time that staff would need to commit, and so we'll need council to support that ask. Is there anybody that would object? Okay, I would ask staff if you have an idea in terms of, a couple months, or when it'll show back up at a study session. Perhaps we can combine this with the work that we're doing on the prioritizing of open space needs. Okay.
Yes, if I may, Mayor, at a minimum, yes to that. Just kind of thinking off the cuff here, I'd have to talk to Tiffany Hooten, our finance director. I think she's in a position now where she might have additional staff to kind of chase down these kinds of issues. It's true, we just haven't been very active in the acquisition of these kinds of grants. And I think it would be an advantage to all of us to look at the landscape again and get a list and see what we are eligible to pursue. And so maybe we might be able to do this in the study session that I've got targeted here as a budget follow-up, and I want to say 25th of September. So we might be able to do it by then, but at a minimum, we'll do it during the prioritization of the open space projects.
Okay, great, thank you. Councilmember Fay.
There will be a District 3 community meeting on Saturday, September 29th, format similar to what we've had before. This one will be at the Littleton Historical Museum and starts at 9:30. Everyone's invited. The agenda will be roughly half an hour of questions and concerns and answers, no magic promised, and followed by a tour of the outdoor farm museums by the museum director, Tim Nims.
Thank you. Councilmember Schlechter.
I have two comments. I had notes somewhere here, but they disappeared, so I don't know. I'll try to go from memory here. I got to attend two events last week. The first was the naturalization ceremony that Councilmember Cole, Elrod, and City Manager Ralph were here. It was amazing, heartwarming, and just really great to see the council chamber packed beyond capacity here with a bunch of people that have taken the time and effort to become new citizens. I believe there were, correct me if I'm wrong, 37 individuals from 22 countries, something like that. But it was a great event and great to see that the Littleton Immigration Center, Resource Center has done a lot with that, so that was great. I also attended the Adams County Economic Development had a ceremony for the new Colorado Air and Spaceport. And now people may think that doesn't have anything to do with Littleton. It's up at the Front Range Airport up by DIA. But if you think back in time, Littleton has a connection to the aerospace industry with Martin Marietta and now with Lockheed Martin. And the origin for this new endeavor at Front Range actually got started in Littleton. I was speaking with Norman Stucker, a Littleton resident and businessman here, actually was the person that got this in motion. He was talking to a company from Utah, and they wanted to come to Colorado, and they said, build us a spaceport. And he happened to stumble upon the governor on a hike on a mountain and got things going, and they slowly started talking, and it took 7 years to go, but now there is a spaceport been licensed by the FAA, one of 10 in the U.S. This is the only one to be within a major metropolitan area, next to an airport, next to transit, next to an interstate. So it's going to really, this is a very transformative operation that's going to be moving forward. So I would put it to the city manager and our economic development team to see how Littleton can be a part of that, how we can attract businesses and people that are working in these businesses to come live in Littleton, work in Littleton, set their business up in Littleton. I think it's important that we look beyond our borders, we look outward, we look big picture, don't just look what's here in Littleton within our borders, don't look backwards at what was, but let's look to the future and see what transformative changes can happen here in Littleton, how we can be a part of that, because I think it's going to be a really, really big deal for the entire region and the entire state, and I hope Littleton is a part of that.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole.
Well, I was waiting to be later. Yeah, that naturalization ceremony is one of the highlights. Even though it's not a council activity, it is a highlight, I think, of Littleton's annual events. And everybody is welcome to that. So next year, maybe watch for when that will be. But we have the Littleton Immigrant Initiative and the effort to help people become citizens. Most of them don't live in Littleton, but we offer this service and we attract people here. This is offered through our library, office in our library, and it's very, very moving. Then some people are, we've already addressed that we are going to be seeing what, if anything, we can do with guns and safety and whatever. There's some people also concerned about our infrastructure, some of which is not directly ours, but the city manager and I were in communication with a few people today about a retaining wall that's up against the south end of the cemetery that's crumbling. And it is to some extent a safety issue and otherwise. And so we are, because that's part of our entry into downtown, if you will. But it's also an important, if you will, frontage across the street of a neighborhood that a lot of people, myself included, love. And so it's important for us to get feedback about things that need to be addressed and to try to do what we can to improve our infrastructure, the sidewalks, the streets, curbs, the whole kit and caboodle. And we appreciate citizens calling attention to things. And we like trying to find ways to address things.
Thank you. Councilmember Driscoll.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to thank those people that had some concern about Triple J Armory, also those people that spoke up against the Airbnb, and especially being in my district, the people that had some concerns about that crosswalk. I do know there's a lot of concerns out there. I know the city, I know the staff, we're all working hard to be on the same page, so I appreciate your input, and I'm glad that city manager and city attorney will be following up with a website to cover on that. On a social side of it, we got Schlossky's, how do you pronounce it? Oktoberfest.
Don't ask me. That's good. Oktoberfest.
Oktoberfest next week. That's Friday through Sunday, so the 14th through 16th, right down at Bega Park. And then also, I just want to remind people, Littleton Business Chamber will be having their first anniversary. That will be September 21st down at McKenna's from 5:30 to 8. Join us if you can.
Thank you.
No report.
No report. And I also have no report, so we will adjourn this meeting and go immediately to the community room for a study session. And we will commence a study session at 7:30. We're adjourned.